TV party tonight!
Oh, we got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews.
Don't want to talk about anything else.
We don't want to know.
We're dedicated, yes,
To our favorite shows.
Oh, my circuits!
Everybody loves Hypnotoad.
Scary dog!
Pearson at Blurnsville.
Futurama!
Good evening. This is TV Party Tonight. I'm your host, the Mandated Reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight, our favorite show is Insatiable, Season 2, brought to you by the good people at Lady Magic Productions, Storied Media Group, Ryan Seacrest Productions, CBS Television Studios, and Netflix. Joining me as he did for Season 1 is Sean Comer, You're Not. Hello, Sean. How are you?
Favorite show, my increasingly toned white ass. What the hell did I just spend the entire day watching?
Are you trying to tell me, sir, that you did not enjoy how this season unfolded like oh so much wonderful laundry?
You know what? Actually, that's not entirely true. There were parts that I enjoyed. It's just that the parts that I enjoyed were overshadowed by this show not just going off the rails. This show has gone off the rails and soared into orbit propelled by fire blowing from its anus.
Okay.
We'll get to it. Like I told you before we went on, I don't even have notes. It's really best to just kind of go point by point. And here also we were just talking about how I've turned a corner in terms of personality between how, you know, my rants about certain franchises and certain franchise entries were once legendary for their screaming vitriol. I'm not even angry. I'm just confused.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure about how a show that was initially had caught controversy for quote unquote fat shaming, which we talked about the first season. I don't even want to go back to it.
Which it didn't.
No, it did not. But went from, you know, how this person who had body image issues turned into a show about murdering all the people. How did we get here?
I have no idea. And actually, no, correction. This is a time when the phrase "I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed" is perfectly apt, because there are stages in the early going where the show, speaking of turning a corner, rounds it and starts to become something akin to what the show was depicted as being in the initial trailers for Season 1. And then all of that just becomes a non-factor. It becomes expendable sides. Genji Cohen never became so distracted by her side characters as this show did.
Can I tell you two secrets?
Go right ahead.
My first secret is that Injun Joe is ticklish.
Beg your pardon?
I've been doing that bit with my son for the last couple of days. It's a Looney Tunes quote.
Injun Joe.
Injun Joe is ticklish. Look it up. It's a thing. My second secret is I actually really like this season more than the first.
And don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there wasn't stuff about this season that I liked. There were moments that I actually thought it really handled pretty damn well. But the biggest overarching problem is it becomes so top heavy with what the fuck that by the end the what the fuck doesn't even faze you anymore.
Here's my big criticism of this show. It's kind of like watching one of the CW DC shows where it's like you know there's this big problem with this particular show, but either you learn to live with it and enjoy what's left, or
Arrow.
you stop watching.
Supernatural.
Those are great examples. And that's where I landed with this, where it was kind of, I learned to stop bitching and love the atomic bomb. The show really should be about a character who's dealing with weight and body issues and the psychology of that and how it bleeds into other issues in her life and affects the people around her. There's a great story to tell about that, especially against the backdrop of pageant shows. Except that the show keeps drunkenly veering into the ditch to deal with, and she's a murderer.
Well, and when it's not doing that, it doesn't just want to zero in on one topical thing. It wants to talk about all of the topical things.
Yes, I especially like the side story about becoming a YouTube and becoming a influencer.
Okay,
Anywho.
that I actually thought that one was fairly amusing. I ain't gonna hate on that. But at various points, it takes what amounts to almost an after-school special or very special episode route to deal with institutionalized racism and the complications of bisexuality, and it's handled with about all the deftness of Jesse Spano getting hooked on speed.
I think that's the charm of the show, though,
and with about all the consequence, because it happens, and then in the style of The Simpsons, let us never speak of the shortcut again.
Some of that, I think, works in favor of the show and is kind of its charm. Now, the structural stuff, that's a deficit, and I'm not going to sit here and defend a deficit of writing. But I think as you called it, sort of the Jesse Spano approach to drama, I think that works in favor of the show and is part of its charm, and it actually kept me entertained for large parts of this. So let's just quick do an overarch here, so that way it doesn't feel like we're jumping all over the place. But as you said, we're just going to wing it here and sort of talk about bits and pieces of this thing. This picks up where season 1 left off, where Patty had just killed what's the character's name?
Christian,
yes.
Yep.
Christian was encouraging her to kill Magnolia, as a matter of fact, and she doesn't do it. She ends up hitting him with the crowbar and just going plumb crazy.
You got the Jason Todd treatment for that.
Yeah, I did.
And her backhand.
And so at the end, Bob shows up, and they decide they got to ditch the car, and of course the car doesn't sink, and that's where we leave our heroes. So the first thing is having to deal with it's the middle of the night, and they're having to deal with the body and the car and all the things. And as the show progresses, Bob is still dealing with the fallout of his marriage and his relationship with Billy Bob Brain Bob.
Bob Barnard.
Yeah, every time he did the Bob joke, I just kept thinking of Pinky and the Brain going, Billy Bob Brain.
Bob Brain.
So you have those two tracks there. Along the way, there's a mini arc a mini storyline where Patty meets her biological father, and it turns out that he's just manipulating her for money, and she shoves him off a cliff, thus committing yet another murder, which is sort of couched in this idea of, oh, well, it was an accident. He fell down the cliff. She didn't push him. There's stuff. The fallout from the Bob stuff is that Bob Armstrong is now running for, I believe it's mayor. Mm-hmm. And then I think our hero Bob decides he's going to run for mayor just out of
it was
spite.
Bob Barnard decides he's going to. Bob Armstrong decides he's going to run for mayor out of spite. Bob Armstrong's dad decides to back Bob Barnard,
Right.
and that's an effort to protect the secret that Bob Armstrong's mom didn't die of cancer. She was bipolar and died of a drug overdose, and
She committed suicide.
Yeah, and then Bob Armstrong's dad, after seeing Bob Barnard at a pageant, develops a new sense of pride in him and pulls his money from Bob Barnard's campaign and gives it to Bob Armstrong. I'm astounded I'm actually able to remember all of that.
Yeah. Yep. Meanwhile, after Patty deals with the dad stuff, we kind of take a time out with Patty for a while. Like all the while, Patty is just sort of still going through with the pageant stuff, but the big thing we have pageant winners that keep dying.
Oh, and one more thing about the Patty's dad. Let's not forget the undercurrents of that one, because there's a question of actual paternity, and it turns out that Dad has only resurfaced back into her life because he smells money, because he got word of her pageant story, and he owes some very bad people some money. And at one point. Just to further add to that, it turned out that once upon a time he was actually dating Patty's grandma, and what happened was Patty's mom came on to him, or maybe he came on to her, and they got together, and that's why Patty's grandma had filed a restraining order against him, why he was kept out of the picture. And all the while there's this other story about how Patty's mom has resurfaced after apparently going to Brazil and getting 2 kilos of coke stuffed into her tatas for safekeeping, and then drug dealers and a plastic surgeon come back to retrieve the booby blow, and Patty ends up murdering 3 drug dealers in self-defense with a combination of capoeira and a pistol. I could just start making random mouth noises at this point, and it would make more sense than what I just watched.
And intersecting with all of that, there's the issue of the pageant killer. So Roxy, who is Bob Barnard's daughter, who was unbeknownst to him up until recently, she ends up getting murdered at the first pageant of this particular season, which makes Patty the winner, if I remember correctly. She's the runner-up, and then the one that was the first runner-up who became the pageant winner, I think, gets killed too. So they keep wanting to cancel these pageants because people keep getting murdered at them. But then for whatever the reasons are, in one case they did a tribute to Roxy, and that became a thing. And then I think in another, people just became interested in these pageants because they wanted to see who would die next, which I thought was hilarious. This all comes to a head later on, and I'll get to that in just a second. Pushing aside our 2 hero characters, we have Regina and Dixie. Dixie had This needs some explaining because it goes to the conclusion of this season. Not like I want to talk about either one of these characters, but this is important stuff, unfortunately. So let me tackle Dixie real quick. Dixie had split from her mom, her adoptive mother, for a little bit. She comes back in, I think, the end of the second episode, beginning of the third, and immediately gets hit by a car. And her story is she finds out. She settles with the guy that hit her, who happens to own the Weenie Taco, and she settles with him, and she ends up then becoming the owner of said Weenie Taco, and the former owner and his son leave the show, leave the state, leave the show, leave the planet. So now she's the overlord of the Weenie Taco. When her biological family shows up,
I for one welcome our new Weenie overlord.
And they tell her, hey, you weren't given up for adoption. You were stolen at a mall in Minnesota.
And by the way, you're not Chinese, you're Korean.
And you're not 18, you're 20. Woo! So, let's change tracks, because that's kind of it for Dixie.
I haven't made a radio dead air "what the fuck is wrong with you" reference in a long time, but now's a good time to invoke Nash's famous tagline, "I couldn't make this shit up if I tried."
So now let's switch to Regina, who, as it turns out, I mean, we got a lot of this in the first season, but the second season they really leaned into it. She is a batshit crazy criminal. She stole Dixie from the mall because she looked like a nice baby to have, and for 30 seconds she was left alone. She, at the start of the season, is out in the street and begging and homeless and all of that. And somewhere along the line, she's decided it's all Bob Armstrong's fault, and that she is going to get this guy. Fast forward to the end of the season, after much machinations and side stories and weird confrontations and whatnot, turns out she's the pageant killer. Spoilers. But she's been doing this in a convoluted plot to set up Bob Armstrong for the murder of Roxy and these other two characters from the pageants that have retarded long names, which is really funny because every character in the show keeps messing them up to ever increasing hilarity.
And you know, maybe it's my kind of cultural awareness, but I'm ever amused that two of those names are Kendall Jackson, which is a budget brand of, I guess, pseudo fancy white wine.
That makes all the sense.
Yeah.
So just as Patty is winning the ultimate of ultimate pageants, Miss American Lady, she's finally won the world heavyweight title. The boy her dream has come to fruition.
Drink up, guys.
Bob is framed for the murder of all of these pageant victims. And in doing so, stupidly runs into public view holding a hatchet. As Regina's going, "Help, help, he's the pageant killer, he tried to kill me." And so, just a few other details. There's a bit where Magnolia, who was conked on the head at the end of season 1, has no memory and was a big silly pants for about half of season 2. There's a whole episode that deals with, the hangover of those night events, just trying to backtrack. And that's as Sean put. And that's
literally, that's how they framed it, as being a hangover reference.
And that's where Sean was talking about what it is to be a black person in 2019, especially when you live in a mostly white community and all that represents. They literally handle it in one conversation. So that's kind of Magnolia's story.
Which, you know what? Feel free to disagree with me. I actually think, take this for what you will, but I think that was actually one of the better written slices of dialogue.
Magnolia's rant is fantastic. That's why, I got the impression that you were kind of eye rolling through it, but
no, not. Are you kidding me? Not at all. I actually rather enjoyed that and thought that was one of the moments where it dropped the pants-on-head nanners and actually said something that was undeniably true.
No, I 100% agree. I liked Magnolia's story, but her speech about, she not fitting in with either community for a variety of reasons actually weirdly resonated with me, and that's because I identify with a mulatto child, but I resonated with the idea of not fitting in, for whatever the reasons are, whatever the context is. So I thought it was great. I thought it was very well handled. And you're right; it was probably more deftly handled than a lot of other stuff is.
And don't get me wrong. You're not wrong. I did still find it very much on the nose, but it was still nice to see them kind of drop the veneer of silliness.
Well, it's action. They told, not showed, I think, is the issue, and I think a better written show would show those things, but instead of just doing a monologue. But in a show like this, I'll take a well acted, well written monologue over a lot of other shit that I saw this season.
Oh, and you know what? Allow me to kind of foreshadow something else I think we're bound to talk about. The interactions between, and help me out here with the character's name, between Patty and Nani's girlfriend.
D.
Yeah, D. About the nature of eating disorders.
Yes.
I thought was also quite well handled in terms of its honesty and how portions of it actually felt fairly organic, and it was one of the few times in the season when you kind of allowed yourself to really kind of feel something for Patty.
Yep, and I wanted to talk about that at length, but I kind of wanted to get through all these different beats, so at least they were addressed.
Well, like I said, it's foreshadowing because I figured that knowing you probably had that earmarked anyway.
So that's her thing. Nani's thing throughout this is she's just kind of the detective of the story. She does a lot of cop stuff. At one point, she talks about wanting to be a cop after not wanting to be a cop, and she has this minor story of wanting to get into John Jay and not getting into John Jay. But she basically for the entire season acts as like Patty's spoiler. Plus, she has her own little thing with Dee, who turns out to be, and it's funny because they reference the Drew Barrymore movie where this happens, where she's actually like doing a story and was using Patty and to a degree Nani to get the goods for the story she needed.
I kind of liken it more to how in every season of Dexter, there was always at least one person or one cop who was just on the very edge the entire season of uncovering Dexter's secret.
Yeah, I actually had, with Nani and the discoveries that she makes, I actually had like a Breaking Bad reference, where the brother-in-law is sitting on the toilet and suddenly realizes, holy shit, such and such is Heisenberg. Yeah. So the discovery that he's Heisenberg at the end of the second to last season was that's what that kind of invoked in me, with Nani figuring out that, oh my god, Patty killed all these people. There's some stuff with Brick. Brick just kind of floats around. He, first he's with Patty, ends up with Magnolia. He has this little mini arc where he's not going to get into college, so he decides he wants to be a YouTube influencer. He wants to be an online influencer, and so he's trying out different pants essentially to figure out which one fits and how he can become an influencer. And as it turns out, eating things with his abs showing works. 2019, everybody.
Okay, not gonna lie. For fuck knows what reason, I actually thought that was kind of amusing.
It's very amusing, but I think, look, this show is nothing but an editorial on the state of culture right now. I don't know if this show, like we talked before the show about like doing The Sopranos, and the fact that people still reference The Sopranos for better or for worse. It has staying power. The Wire had staying power. Breaking Bad had staying power. The Shield. These are all things that get referenced no matter how many years go by. In a few more years, I'm not sure if anyone's going to remember Insatiable if it's not still going.
I guarantee you, no.
Right. So that's my point. Like, Insatiable kind of works very much in the now, but in a few years, when culture makes some other changes, I don't know how well it ages, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Anyway, I think that's it for the major characters. I mean, Alyssa Milano does a thing where she sort of revolves around Bob Armstrong now that she's free of Bob, and at some point they're feuding. They actually split the house down the middle, quite literally. That old gag.
Yeah.
She continues to do her like tampon company, which
Tampazzler,
which then plays a role in how Bob gets her husband gets framed. And I want to say that's it. That's it for all the major characters. So right off the bat, let's talk about how, and this for me, is why I appreciated this season more than the prior season. The prior season, I felt like, we talk about with a lot of fantasy, like there's always so much world building. I felt like season 1 was a lot of setup. And it almost feels like season 1 and season 2 were one long 20-episode CW season that just got split in half, and episode 10 was the mid-season finale, and the story ended where it did, with Patty getting the crown and Bob going to prison. Because I feel like it took up to about 10 episodes for them to firmly establish all the characters and what the show was going to be about, so that this season could rest easily and really start to deal with what it is to have an eating disorder and how that affects Patty's thinking, how it affects her decision-making, and how it affects other people. I actually thought, for as silly as this show is at times, and boy, does it hit the silly meter, the stuff about Patty's eating disorder, I complained last season, like the bit with the cake, while graphic and heart-wrenching, and I don't want to rehash the debate of whether or not it was too long. Go back and listen to our first podcast about it.
I don't think it was. I think it was as long as it needed to be to make you necessarily uncomfortable.
But it's also, I feel like, the only time they really dealt with the psychodynamics of an eating disorder. Whereas this season dealt with it very directly. It dealt with it multiple times. You got to see her kind of go to meetings and think and talk about her thought process and everything. Also, I'll pitch it over to you. What did you think of how they handled the concept of eating disorders through the guise of Patty?
When they actually gave it the spotlight, I thought they handled it fantastically well. Those were moments when, to their credit, they also turned Bob Armstrong from awkward gay caricature into someone who actually displayed sincere human concern and compassion for a young lady that he was beginning to really view as a bit of an albatross and just kind of a force of nature that was just sort of happening to him.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciated how focusing on that also shifted the dynamic between Patty and Dee. Dee being someone who was already well into coping with her own issues with food in her body, and was just trying to kind of patiently, if reluctantly, explain to this obviously troubled young woman, look, as much as you want it to be, this is not as simple as you're making it out. You know, this is probably a layered problem, and if you're really serious about dealing with this, you should think about it step by step and not think there's going to be a magic bullet.
It's one of the things I love about Patty is, and I love about the writing, I should say, because they've made it, I think, very clear that Patty's eating disorder is a symptom of a greater personality issue. That, and that's the thing with mental health issues, is that it's not just you have this one. It's not like not like cancer. Like you have this cancer. It does this. It affects you this way, and these things, in theory, should cure it. And when it's gone, at least until it comes back, if it does.
Right.
Mental health doesn't work that way. I'm actually having this discussion with one of my superiors today, where we were dealing with a young lady who I made the statement, she has an obvious cognitive impairment. And then this other person goes, no, that's trauma. And we went back and forth, and we arrived at this place of trauma can present itself and can actually cause cognitive impairment. And so it became kind of a chicken or the egg thing. And so what I'm trying to get at here is that to say I have an eating disorder, that's not the end of your mental health issues, nor is it the beginning. It's somewhere in the Venn diagram of a variety of issues. So you see, Patty talks about, and I love this, Patty talks about whenever I'm alone, I want to eat. So right there, you have food as a vice, as a coping mechanism for another kind of anxiety. And so you start to see how these all bleed together, right? She has codependency issues. She clearly has sort of manic thinking at times and impulsivity issues and depression, and she just sort of cycles through these things. They don't do the world's greatest job of presenting that aspect of her because they are telling a dramatic story that isn't really as focused on that. And I don't think Hollywood really understands bipolar disorder to begin with. But,
oh no, far from it. They understand bipolar disorder about as well as they understand how computers work.
You mean to tell me all that hacking I see in the movies is really fictional?
Oh, you mean hammering on a keyboard like a fucking coked up chimp, and then just grimly whispering, "I'm in."
That's how I thought it worked. Yeah. So
enhance.
I mean, I need that camera and that one over there and that one. Anywho, so look, you're doing a dramatic presentation. I'm going to allow for a certain degree of not totally representing various aspects of mental health well, so that you have some of the charm and wit that you need to stay with a character. I mean, it's not a documentary.
I'll grant that a little bit, but with this coming season, allow me to be a little bit more biting toward Netflix. Guys, after the blowback you dealt with when it came to 13 Reasons Why, did you not maybe think that perhaps some of your shows should handle mental illness and distress with maybe a little bit finer touch?
Are you really going to lay that at Netflix's feet, though? Netflix is a distribution company. It's not a production company.
You know what? Maybe it should be laid at their feet, though, because the thing is, they're also the ones who are putting the material out there and essentially endorsing it by having it on their platform. So while, yes, I understand they want to afford creators as much freedom as possible, maybe perhaps they could do with having a little bit more consciousness of how some things are coming across, and say, hey, whoa, maybe we should be employing at least some review here.
At what point in production do you do that? Because if you don't do it in sort of the pre-production phase, I'm not pretending to know at what point Netflix is involved in getting things. My understanding is that there's a pilot, like anything else, and Netflix, like any other network, buys the pilot and orders X amount of episodes, and then they go and produce them. Now, unless you have a representative of Netflix amongst the creative staff, I don't know how they'd have any involvement.
Well, okay, let me ask you something. Netflix wants to be regarded on a standard with other television networks, other movie studios.
Mm-hmm.
Do other movie studios and television production houses not exert some control?
Sure. The studio that produces the movie obviously offers notes along with the check.
Okay, well then, in my opinion, even for as much leeway as they afford creators, I think Netflix, if they're wanting to play that game to compete that way, should also be kind of expected to hold the people who produce content for their platform to some kind of standards. Are they probably going to strike just the right balance at first? No, but you also have to start somewhere. Mm-hmm. You can't tune an instrument. You can't put a guitar in tune if at first you don't strike a few bad notes and kind of play it by ear and say, okay, way flat. Let's tune it this way. Okay, little bit too much. Let's tone it down. Let's tone it down a little bit more. There. That's about where it belongs.
Here's my only other counter argument, and then I'll let you have the final word, and then we'll move on from this. if you look at the average amount of shows, really, first-run shows on any given network, there's not a lot. They make up a lot of that time in syndication or repeats and whatnot. Have you ever seen the volume of shows Netflix has running through at any given time, running through its platform?
Oh, are you kidding me? They have so many new shows that more often than not, I come across something that was never hyped, never even previewed, even on the platform itself.
Right. And I'm not even just talking about TV shows. They're movies, they're comedy specials, they're cartoons.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll give you a good example. Last year, Carrie and I had a friend of ours stay with us who was talking about this weird little satirical DIY show called The Curious Creations of Christine McConnell. It's about a weird, macabre, otherwise actually fairly normal-looking lady played by, actual popular Instagram DIY crafty personality named Christine McConnell, who makes these really elaborate kind of nerdy horror or spooky themed crafts. I'd never fucking heard about it. I had never seen a preview for it. I had never seen any hype for it. It was just kind of all of a sudden there. They kind of hype something when they feel like there's something attached to it that's fairly marketable. Best-selling domestic organizing author gets her own show about helping disorganized families improve their life through tidying up. Okay, hype the shit out of that. Clear audience. We can focus on them. It'll go over like gangbusters, and it does. Dave Chappelle signs up for a new slate of stand-up specials. Hey, people still love Dave Chappelle even in 2019. Do it. Breaking Bad movie? Fuck yeah. Emmy Gold. Quirky Instagram crafty lady wants to make spoopy gingerbread houses. Okay. Here you go. Whenever it's done, you can go ahead. Just let us know and we'll upload it.
Earlier this year, while I was on the cruise with my family, to kill time, I was looking for something that didn't require a lot of brain power. I didn't want to get invested in a real, in a Breaking Bad type show. So I was looking through like the cooking and food shows, and I found Million Pound Menu, and I binged that because it was only 6 episodes, and the second season hit Netflix a few months ago to zero fanfare. Like zero marketing. I just knew about it because I was Googling when will season 2 happen, and oh my god, it's happening next week.
Here's an even better one. David fucking Letterman has a show on Netflix. When was the last time you heard any genuine hype surrounding it?
I thought he was dead.
Aside from the little screensaver screenshot that airs that pops up along with, like you said, about a dozen other shows,
right,
when you just leave the app idle for too long.
Again, I thought David Letterman was dead. I had no idea he had a new show. So the point is, I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm kind of looking at the mechanics of, well, how would they do that? I mean, if you're saying, hey, look, 90% of your stuff you can probably just leave alone. It'll be what it'll be. People will like it or they won't. It's fine. But if you're going to do a show that tackles something as sensitive as mental illness, pay the fuck attention and get on board, get a consultant, do something so that these kinds of things are not wildly inaccurate. Okay, look, I'm not going to argue against that point. I think if you're talking about like, no, they need creative control over all their projects, I don't think that's fucking possible.
well, yeah, because at some point you're going to have those prestige shows that are going to get a boatload of attention whenever there's some well, up until recently, because obviously it's no longer a thing now. Orange is the New Black. Got that kind of attention. Fucking BoJack Horseman. Lots of their other shows.
House of Cards.
The Marvel shows, House of Cards, shit like that. But at a certain point, you become like that Catholic mom who has goddamn sure gone forth and multiplied. But meanwhile, you've got the oldest children and the youngest children who are getting all of the attention, and then you've got the middle children, like 13 Reasons Why and Insatiable, that can just be over in the corner setting the cat on fire, and nobody so much as wondering why the smoke alarm's not going off.
The other side of that is not 13 Reasons Why, because I think that one made news. But the only reason why Insatiable made news
at first.
The only reason why I think Insatiable even made news, again, first season. Second season, you know why we know about that the second season? Because I'm following the show for purposes of following up and doing a podcast on it. This thing didn't fucking make news, man. It made news the first time around because fat shaming. And then once everyone kind of got over that and got distracted by the next squirrel that was setting itself on fire, and everyone fucking forgot about Insatiable. So here's what I'll say. I think that I made the statement, I don't think the writers of this show really understand bipolar disorder, but the sky is also blue and water's wet, and Hollywood doesn't really understand mental illness. I think they try. I think I give them credit for the effort that they put into this, because I don't think Debbie Ryan comes all the way off as not being somebody who is accurately portraying mental illness. Here's my problem with the way they write Debbie Ryan's character. In those moments where she's doing narration and she's sharing her thoughts with the audience and her thinking, I think they mostly got it dead on. And I think in how she came to be that way, the product of a dysfunctional family and mistreatment along the way, and how all those things weigh in. And they haven't even really touched on this, but there's probably some degree of genetics involved here. I think they've mostly got it with that. The problem is, like a superpower, she kind of turns it off so that she can be charming lead character that we want to root for and see succeed despite all the other bad shit she does. And it's kind of not how people work, but sure. I can't get myself too bent out of shape over that. Otherwise, I can't watch the show. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be stuck. At that point, if I want to watch something involving mental illness, I got to watch fucking Snapped or, Making a Murderer or something like that. Oh, God, what was the one that my colleague used to watch? In Treatment. Which, by the way, I'm sure In Treatment's a great fucking show, and I think I watched one episode of that once. But, everybody I knew who was into mental health was, raving about In Treatment, and I would rather throw myself out a fucking window than watch that. Boy, is that not what I watch TV for.
You sound about like my dad growing up when it came to asking him about how he felt about any police procedural.
I was going to say, Hill Street Blues.
Well, he had kind of two takes on it. Number one was, it's what I do all day anyway. Why would I want to come home and watch shows about it on TV? And number two was, it's insultingly unrealistic.
But and to your dad's point, that's what I'm saying about how mental illness is portrayed in the show. I think they do the best job they can in presenting it in as dramatic and as entertaining a fashion, because that's what we're all here for, as possible. But it doesn't really work that way, and they can't. If you just put up a camera, where I work, and just kind of focus on the mentally ill people. And as far as watching Crash TV, it would be interesting, but it's not particularly dramatic.
Right.
But let me go back to you. We kind of laid a lot on the table here. Any other thoughts about sort of Patty's inner monologue and how she has these, varying shades, kind of Venn diagram mental illness going on, and how that affects the rest of the cast and the.
Once again, as weird as it's going to sound to say something like this, I think the moments when she kind of gives in to the beast and really goes whole hog at her food, they're some of Debbie Ryan's best acted moments.
Yeah. She's not a bad actress by any stretch.
No, not remotely. Please don't think that we're pinning any of this on Debbie Ryan. The moments where she actually is dealing with her problem are legitimately fantastic. They're well shot. They're well paced. They're well delivered by Debbie, and they get across what they need to, and that is that she's starting to slip.
Let's transition and talk about Bob.
Which one?
Bob Armstrong.
Here I was hoping you wanted to vote 45 minutes talking about Junkyard Bob and how we need to hear more about Junkyard Bob.
So, and here's where I'm going to lean on you, because I've talked a lot about Debbie Ryan and mental illness here. Bob has become sort of the stand-in for the character struggling with sexuality. I'll keep it really simple, because I'm not sure where you stand on this. I thought, as a guy, and I talked about this. I don't know if you listened to our 90210 show, but okay. Or did you watch?
Nothing against you. It's just that 90210 ain't my jam. So
did not take that personally.
Okay,
good. I don't know if you are aware of what happened on BH 90210, but Gabrielle Carteris, Gabrielle Carteris' fictional portrayal of Gabrielle Carteris does this whole "I'm struggling with my sexuality" thing on the show. Mm-hmm. Like, she makes a thing of it, and it's sort of like a meta representation of this woman dealing with her sexuality as the character on the show and the character portrayal of the real life person. If that makes any sense.
I wasn't aware. How does Gabby Carteris identify?
That's the problem. That's the whole story. Is she knows that she's not totally straight. She doesn't know if she's gay, and she doesn't want to label herself. She's kind of sexually fluid because she's, I guess the word would be curious, just trying to figure things out. But the story ends up being the world is trying to label and pigeonhole her and demand she take a side, which is not something she's particularly comfortable with since she just started all this like 20 minutes ago. And that's kind of Bob's story.
Yeah.
You don't know where Bob is ultimately coming from, because he's had so much bottled inside of him just because of where he lives and the society he grew up in and the kind of dad he's got and the mom he had and the expectations of someone coming from his station in life. And so for me, I think Bob is a really interesting character. But this whole season, I feel like once they blew up him and Alyssa Milano and Bob Barnhart, they could kind of then take a step back and have him reflect on things. So I'll just kind of pitch it to you. How do you think they handled him in his sort of exploration of his own psyche and intersexuality and trying to figure out, well, what am I?
I mean, the way I see it relatively well, from my limited experience, because a lot of this is still very new to me too, keep in mind. But everyone kind of figures themselves out a little bit differently. There's a little bit of a different origin story, if you will, to how everyone identifies. That kind of has its own character and goes back to who that person is, where they were before kind of confronting that crossroads. And I think it's been handled relatively well. Obviously, it's with a lot of the requisite silliness.
Sure.
But they're clearly touching on things that those of us under the LGBTQ umbrella actually do have to grapple with. And sometimes, yeah, that includes kind of reaching some surprising conclusions when you're actually in a relationship with somebody. That can be kind of tricky to navigate and that have to be sort of figured out with care. I really had no issue with that and haven't really had any.
I was curious to see if you thought he was too much of a caricature, if they were making light of it or not, which I didn't think they were. But
is he a bit of a caricature? Yes, at times, but at the same time, is it also one where you can't exactly say it's relatable? Wouldn't say that either. I think in the moments where they do approach it kind of sincerely, especially the moments between Bob and his dad. I mean, plenty of queer people of all ages have come across interactions like that. More and more, we get to kind of hear about more of the heartwarming stories of parents and grandparents who are a little more accepting. But that's still not the status quo, and especially not someplace like freaking Georgia. You know, especially not basically small town Georgia. So, no. I mean, no real issues with that. I thought was it handled exactly delicately and artfully? No. But then again, you know, it's also a comedy.
I didn't think they played it for laughs in the sense of let's make a joke of it. I think it's played for laughs he's in sort of cringy, uncomfortable situations. And I was thinking about this with the same thing with Debbie Ryan. There are definitely cringy moments, especially with some of the inner monologue stuff. But I realized about myself, I'm cringing because how unreliable the narrators are in this show. Not like Legion unreliable, where you don't know what's real and what isn't, but more along the lines of you're clearly getting an insight into broken thinking, defective thinking on both characters. I mean, you know, Debbie Ryan's Patty gets a lot of flack throughout the series for sort of oscillating between semi-charming and monstrous, but you know, and Bob always is in this position of, oh my God, I have to put out the fire that Patty started. But I find that Bob is just as bad at making critical decisions. Not the least of which was when told choose your wife or choose this other person, and he says I can't choose, or whatever it was he does. You know, just like he's constantly fumbling the ball.
Now you did hit on something else that really did make me roll my eyes, and you know, it's a wonder at the time that I didn't blurt out a Phoenix Wright style objection, pointing emphatically at the screen when Carrie and I saw this. And that's the part where they get to him suggesting an open relationship and him saying, for you, it's something I would be willing to do. Buddy. Open relationships that start that way don't go well. And I say that as someone who is in a poly relationship.
But that was the beautiful part about that, Sean, is that so many people relate. Not everyone, obviously, and I know the poly community is wide and everything else. I'm not saying this is a definitive a definitive way of looking at the poly community. I'm saying there are people who think this way in and out of that community that think an open relationship is about them satisfying as much need as possible with zero regard to everybody else around them.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's right up there with bisexuality in terms of widely misunderstood sexual identifications. It's the idea of, it's a lot like the kind of mocking stereotype, bisexual people are afraid to commit. And apparently, according to what a lot of people are taught, if you're poly, it means that you are absolutely always ready, willing, and able to fuck absolutely anything that moves. And yeah, that whole idea of, I'll have an open relationship if that's what you want. Mark my words, if this show has any sense of realism, that will quickly blow up spectacularly in Bob's face.
Sure. So we already talked a little bit about Magnolia's story. Was there anything more on that you felt like we just needed to flesh out? Because I'm kind of okay with they handled it well. It was a nice episode.
When you say nice episode, which episode are you talking about? The one at the college?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Granted, they very tongue-in-cheek pretty much came right out and said, "Why lie? We're aping The Hangover here." Which, hey, at least you're honest about it. But I thought that subject was one that I didn't expect them to touch on, but that they handled shockingly well. Like as we said, that whole idea of she has to listen to everybody else's persecution and abandonment complex, and how everybody else apparently stands alone and thinks she has it so easy, when the truth is she's split down so many lines as far as her social and genetic parity that she feels more alone than anyone, because she doesn't feel definitively a part of any one class, of any one in-group. And so she kind of has no one to really call her own at any given point. Incredibly tasteful. It was really honest, and it's one of the times when, after a season where Magnolia wasn't somebody we were exactly always cheering for, it felt downright redemptive to see her be a little bit better fleshed out.
All right. When we first saw season 1, did you think Regina was going to end up being the character that she became by the end of season 2? Because I didn't. I truly didn't see any of that coming.
Abso-fucking-lutely not.
And is the show better off for it? Is it really better off for the fact that instead of kind of singularly focusing on these variety of mental health issues and sexuality issues, which I guess could be one and the same, instead we got, "It was me, Austin. It was me the whole time." It
was easily the most soap opera moment of the entire goddamn thing. And my good friend Awani from Hunters of Artemis was just replying to some of my random, verbal spewing tweets about the show, and she just said, "OMG, I hate that I enjoy it so much." and followed that up with, "There's never a dull moment because it keeps getting more and more unhinged." And Regina's entire storyline just sums that up so freaking well.
She has got to be the most nails on a chalkboard character in this whole thing. And it's not like it's totally filled with suave and, charismatic folks. But,
No.
whoa. She is fucking rough, man.
It's just, I'm at a loss as to what to actually say about her.
Well,
I really, really am. But yeah, I didn't see the whole she kidnapped a kid.
But it's totally believable.
Very, very much so. And I mean, hell, you want to talk about an intersection of tone. I watched that storyline just as earlier tonight. Carrie was marveling that her sister let her 5-year-old walk around a trick-or-treating event on a college campus at night in Metro Kansas City.
When I was, I can't remember if it was with Jonas or if it was with Lily, but I remember, it might have been, I don't remember anymore. Probably Jonas. I remember taking him into a fast food restaurant. I think it was a Five Guys. And between his car seat and other stuff and trying to get everything out of the and I didn't have a stroller, so trying to get him and everything else out of the damn restaurant, I was like, I'm gonna have to make 2 trips. So I didn't want to. So I was like, I had a choice: make 1 trip out with all the other stuff, come back, get him, or get him, leave him in the car, and go back and get the other stuff. And I'm like, neither was a good decision. But I had to make one because I couldn't get it all out at the same time.
And you see, I kind of get that because in a way, while yes, I can see how they're playing this for laughs, you got to remember, I'll be 37 years old in about 5 weeks. I grew up in a time when 2 of the most kind of paradigm-shifting, national attention-grabbing crimes in America were the tragedy of John Walsh that led to the birth of America's Most Wanted, and my having grown up in the Twin Cities area, the kidnapping and, as it turned out, sexual assault and murder of Jacob Wetterling. So, that whole idea to me kind of smacks of, you're making light, but, that's a bold move there, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
What I was getting to was, I remember I think I opted to, let me just get all the other stuff first because that'll go a lot quicker, and I can still see him from the window, so it's not like anyone can take him. And I literally ran out through the shit in my car, ran back in. And somebody actually said, like, we thought you abandoned your baby. I was gone for less than 10 seconds. Give me a fucking break. And again,
you say that, but earlier tonight when Carrie was when I was aghast that her sister let, like I said, her 5-year-old walk around at night in a crowd on a college campus in Metro Kansas City. It was on a college campus. I said, hey, go look up John Walsh. You know where his son was snatched?
Sure.
Right outside a toy store he had just been kicked out of in a crowded mall while his mom was returning something in a department store.
Did you ever walk to school?
Yes,
How old
I did.
Were you? When you first started walking?
Oh, God, how old was I? Well, I was fortunate that, Park Terrace Elementary School was about, a couple blocks away from my house. I would have probably been 7, 8, something like that, which, but to be fair, I did not walk to school alone. I walked with friends and my sister, and it was through a very safe suburban neighborhood. Now, on the other hand, at the same time, there were other, popular hangouts for kids and whatnot in our neighborhood that were nearby where, they were a little more exposed, and my mom in particular was very adamant about, no, you're not riding You're not riding your bike to the baseball card store. You can't ride your bike around the corner. I'm afraid you're gonna get snatched or hurt.
So I started walking to school in first grade, which probably would have made me between 6 and 7.
Right.
I also walked with a friend. We were the same age, but it was just the two of us. And me and him walked to school every year until I left that town.
And you grew up in Long Island, right?
Yeah, I grew up in a predominantly lower to middle class black neighborhood. It was like the majority population was African American, and we were one of the few white families that lived there. And we were on the border of one of the border cities of Queens. You know, anyone from Long Island is just like, you still got a little ways to go from where Uniondale was to Queens, but fucking go with it. We were just kind of after the Queens border, one of those cities, one of the early sort of white flight neighborhoods, and then the whites fled that neighborhood as more black folks moved in from the city. I bring that up to mention the fact that the area also had drugs in it. So this is 81, 82, somewhere in there. It's 82, 83. So early 80s, there's drugs, and I'm walking to school with my buddy from the first grade all the way to sixth grade. That's not to say, right or wrong. We could say it was a different time, but it's context is king, as Eric Bischoff would say. And so what you allow your kid to do at what age? I was staying home by myself at 5.
Yeah, well, and you see,
and there's no way we would let Jonas stay home by himself now.
Yeah, see, well, and another difference there, for me, it was mostly white, middle-class, Twin Cities suburb.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and look, I'm going to tell you right now, as a parent, you will, you hopefully, can't say it's for everybody, obviously, but I think hopefully you always make decisions with the safety of your child first. But you will inevitably be caught in a situation where you have no good decisions. Whether it's you have a baby and you have to go to the bathroom and it's like, well, I don't know what to do now. I'm going to shit my pants or I have to put this baby down.
I have been in what I would consider one of the milder situations along that spectrum. So yes, I know what you mean.
And so the whole thing where they have the mom who walks away from the child for just a second, and in that 1 second, fucking takes off with the baby. It's funny. We earlier this year in Shazam, there's a scene at the very beginning of it where the mom loses the kid in the large crowd, and in that particular instance, she never went looking for him. She saw him, but she never went looking. But she never reconnected and just sort of abandoned the kid. I remember we went to Disney during the Festival of Lights, Christmas Osborne Lights thing. I think I just named it 3 different things. The Osborne Lights thing that was done at I think it's Hollywood Studios, and we lost Lily for a minute. And,
oh wow!
Yeah, and I mean when you talk crowded, this was you couldn't move more than a step without bumping into somebody else. And obviously we stopped what we were doing and immediately looked for her, and we thankfully we found her without it being a major catastrophe. But shit like that happens, despite your best intentions, despite the best decisions you can possibly make. Sometimes just shit happens, and you hopefully it doesn't end terribly, and thankfully that didn't. But I understand what you're saying about it seems like they're playing that moment up for laughs. But, I mean, it's kind of a thing you deal with as a parent, and 9 out of 10 times it probably doesn't end badly, but there's always that one time that ends horribly.
Well, and you know what? In their defense, something that I remember my good friend Allison Pregler, the longtime host of Movie Nights, once saying, and I forget what it was. I think it was actually a movie that she reviewed on her channel. Once said, look, realistically, you can make just about anything funny, even something like rape, if you handle it right.
Sure.
And I got to give him credit. This was one time where, yes, although we're talking about a kidnapping, the whole way they handle it and everything, it was handled in such a way that, yes, it was still able to be funny. So, yes, if nothing else, given the context and the eyes through which I viewed it, I was more impressed than anything else at, okay, had a lot of other people handled this, I wouldn't have probably been quite as impressed, but credit where it's due.
I think it helps that Dixie's kind of a shitty character, who I wanted to give it just a minute to talk about.
Oh, she is. She's a dimwit.
Who's more nails on a chalkboard, her or Regina for you?
Mm-hmm. Oh, me or Regina? God, I found Dixie far more palatable, just because it was amusing to me the way she kind of appropriated her biological family's culture, despite having spent absolutely no time around it. And just kind of like you almost have to say it in like a Ralph Wiggum voice. I'm Korean now.
Right. Yeah. It's funny. She was obviously less ridiculous this season than I think she was in the first season, where her and her mother were both total villains. Whereas this one, they played her more sympathetically this season. I don't know why though. Like I don't understand what the Dixie character really added to this season.
It was a little bit like Pennsatucky in Orange is the New Black.
I'm not following. Like you're gonna have to take me on the journey here.
Being kind of somewhat detestable,
mm-hmm.
and then finding a way to kind of guide her around the bend toward actually being kind of accepted, even sort of likable. I enjoyed that there was even a moment where I think of all people, it was, I believe, one of her fed up black employees who pointed out, or maybe it was her biological brother who pointed out, being Korean is more than just K-pop.
It was her brother.
Oh, it was her brother. Okay.
Okay, I now understand your argument. I'm not there yet. By season 2, Pennsatucky was a sympathetic character and somebody I wanted to see succeed. We haven't quite gotten there with Dixie yet. She was just less annoying this season.
You kind of had to reach the point where, well, with Pennsatucky, you had to kind of have that whole sort of détente, if you will, with Boo.
Mm-hmm.
That turned into a very genuine friendship, kind of against all odds and all explanation. Whereas, we're not there yet with Dixie, but it feels like that's where it could go. But for right now, like I said, it went around the bend to where she's, as opposed to being malicious, she's a lovable idiot.
Anything else? We've been at this for an hour now. I think the show is at its best when it's focusing on the inner turmoil of our lead characters, and the show is at its cringiest, at its worst. Well, it's at its worst when it's at its cringiest, I think. And I wouldn't call it Three's Company level of cringy, but there are definitely moments where I had to hit the fast forward button.
I'll sum it up as briefly as possible like this. This is a show that has lost its identity and might want to discover it fast, because I have a feeling we're going to see the announcement any day now. Insatiable renewed for third and final season.
I fucking hope so.
And the problem with that is your central premise, which when I initially heard it sounded genuinely interesting to me. It sounded like a bizarre mashup between two of my favorite teen comedies ever made, Drop Dead Gorgeous and Jawbreaker.
Really?
Absolutely.
There's anything wrong with either of those, especially Jawbreaker.
Love Jawbreaker.
I just didn't think that those resonated with you. That's fascinating.
Oh, or are you kidding me? I laugh myself stupid at Drop Dead Gorgeous every single goddamn time I watch, especially at Kirstie Alley screaming, "Ding! Fries are up!" and also, that's why we Lutherans use grape Kool-Aid for the blood of Christ. And But no, they're two of my favorite comedies ever, and that's why I was so excited when I heard about this show, because that was what it reminded me of, and I couldn't wait to watch it all. But now it's straying so far from that, and it's doing so by means of a formula wherein it's like watching a bad cruiserweight match. You're being hit with so many repeated, uncanny, implausible high spots that after a while they just don't even faze you anymore. As I noted earlier, as I said to Carrie and our kiddo Ace when I was watching it, I said it's gotten to the point where every time there's a twist that's supposed to be surprising, at this point I just say, sure, why not? Because that's what we're down to. Because everything is just kind of meaningless when everything is high spot after high spot after high spot after high spot. It's hard for me to be entertained by this the same way it's hard for me to be entertained by a Jack Evans or Young Bucks match. Because there's no satisfying build-up to any of this shit. I mean, because instead of build-up, we're just substituted for wait about 2 or 3 script beats. And something fucked up is bound to happen, and sometimes it's amusing.
Do you watch AEW?
You know what? I've been meaning to. I haven't had the pleasure yet. In fact, no. I don't have anything DVR'd quite yet.
Last week there was it was either last week or the week before. Whenever it was I think it was the Private Party Young Bucks match where the Marquez guy did 97 topes in a row, back to back, from one side of the ring to the other, which is as good a description as the tempo of this show as I can think of.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and it's exactly, and like I said, it's exactly the way I feel about Young Bucks matches. Is I know that some people enjoy that, and hey, that's fine. Wrestling is wrestling. More power to you. Like what you like. Good for you. I, however, on the other hand, feel like they have absolutely murdered the super kick as a plausible finisher the way people for years have been. I mean, Jake Roberts once said it himself. He said, I'd like to thank everybody over the years who has been using the DDT as a transitional move, because you make mine look even better for the fact I actually could pin people after it.
Yeah,
it's just meaningless.
Yeah, that's sort of to the show's detriment, and we're gonna end where we started. When the show was dealing with mental anguish, I think the show works, and teen drama. I think the show works really well. But it keeps making these left turns into murder, and I don't know if people really understand that mentally ill people don't all turn into murderers.
No!
I feel like I need to say that out loud many, many times.
See, and last season ended on such a promising note, with Patty reaching the epiphany I had been waiting for all 10 episodes, that being skinny didn't make her better. That she was basically the same shitty person that she was when she was chronically overweight. And now I'm at a point with this season where I've amended my Drop Dead Gorgeous comparison to where I think it is like Drop Dead Gorgeous if Drop Dead Gorgeous were written by an ADD-addled 10-year-old.
I was going to go with Squirrel on Crack, but yours works well too.
Well, or an even better comparison, and one that I think will maybe resonate even better. This entire series, especially the second half of it, is like a live-action adaptation or reinterpretation of Daffy Duck trying to pitch the climax of the Scarlet Pumpernickel.
Oh boy, we haven't referenced that in a while. And then the dam broke. But you know what? But you're so right. Insatiable really is a 10-part. Is the equivalent of 10 episodes of And Then the Dam Broke.
It is, but the sad part is, through so much of the wackiness, yes, there are moments where they manage to kind of fall ass backwards into some genuine, encouraging character development. But then there's so much where it's just nothing but shit happens, and you're trying to pass it off as character development. I question whether Bob Barnard has really kind of covered any distance as a character at this point.
I liked him a lot this season because they toned him down so much. He wasn't the villain as much this season as he was last season, and they seem to have given him enough anguish that humanized him for me that I didn't like. I remember talking about this with you last time, that I really hated his character because he's just that smarmy. He's I don't know if you watch Bob's Burgers, but he's like Bob's neighbor with the Italian restaurant, Jimmy Pesto. Where he's just whenever you're at your lowest and falling down and tripping, he's always there to insult you. And for some odd reason, he falls ass backwards into gold no matter what he does, and it's just the most annoying thing, and it's an annoying character. So they kind of blew him up at the end of season 1, which humanized him, and then he never really got back on that horse again this season.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of satisfied with where things went with Coralie, who seems to also be sort of figuring her identity out, and where she fits in the lives of all the people that she loves.
I knew they weren't really going to give her a forcible abortion, by the way, but Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
There are some definite why is this necessary moments in this show.
Right.
That being the big one.
And then you realize kind of that, yeah, Patty's body count has really piled up, and there was a little twinge of interest when you kind of realized at the end that she was kind of figuring out, much like Oliver Queen in that one season of Arrow, yikes. I actually was starting to enjoy this. And yet none of it has anything to do with the damn eating disorder.
Yeah. Yeah, you brought up Genji Cohen before, now that I've had some time to process it. Yeah, Genji Cohen never lost the plot this badly. And the more we talk about it, the more, because I didn't really process it when I first watched it. I was just sort of taken in by so much other stuff that I got distracted from a major flaw in the show, is that it has a weird identity problem. It does not know what it wants to be about.
No clue. No.
And so I keep coming back to the same thing. Like, you've got a lot of really good stuff here. Why? It feels like like in the writers' room, they were like, we want to address this, and this, and then somebody at the end is like, okay, but what's going to keep people coming back? And another person went, well, what if Patty kills a bunch of people and turns out that she substitutes murder for eating? Like, what does that have to do with anything? And everyone else just went, shut up. People love murder. Haven't you ever seen The Wire? All right. So I believe People Love Murder. Haven't you ever seen The Wires? This is a great place to end this discussion.
Yet another show that I need to finally sit down and watch.
You really should, for God's sakes. My goodness. Put it on while you're gaming. Just one TV's got The Wire on, one TV's got Overwatch.
That ain't a bad idea.
All right. With that said, that is the end of Season 2. Let me ask you this, Sean. In 50 words or less, where we leave things is Patty loves to murder. She has the crown, and Bob's in prison, and righting wrongs and serving justice and putting Patty behind bars is now his destiny, as he's dragged off by federal correctional officers. If there's a Season 3, and God help me, I hope there isn't. I'm kind of done with the show, and I will watch it if there's a Season 3, but I kind of think, like, they told a nice story. Please don't do any more. This ended well. Let's not do any more of this. Let's move on. Let us never speak of the shortcut again. But because we, television society, 2019, are gluttons for punishment. If there's a season 3, how do they write themselves out of the corner they're currently in? What do you think? 50 words or less.
I think it has to come down to a kind of choosing of the sides. Patty versus those who believe that she needs to be stopped. I think that on one side you're going to have Bob and I think maybe Nani, those who are just kind of repulsed. On the other, I think you could very well have Magnolia and Patty. I think you will have Patty's mom caught somewhere in between all of this. To be honest, Bob Barnard is so damn removed from Patty's shenanigans. I'm not sure where you fit him in, except as just being an ancillary loose end that needs to be tied up, unless you somehow bring him into all this.
I think they have to do a time jump. I mean, they've already time jumped far enough into the future that Patty won the pageant and is touring the world as Miss Lady or whatever the hell the name of the pageant was.
American Lady, yeah.
And he had to have gone through a murder trial and been convicted and is already and is tucked neatly into prison at this point. So they jumped. I'm gonna take a wild guess. It's a few months into the future when we leave that final scene. I feel like season 3 has to pick up a few years down the line. I think some time has to pass. I'd like to see like Nani being maybe like a law school student instead of a cop, since they've already shit-canned that idea. By her not getting into John Jay. I don't know. I like the idea of maybe like Bob Barnard somehow like Nani. I like where you started with this, is where a coalition starts to form of people who think Patty needs to be stopped and and held accountable for murdering people, and so you have Nani who picks up the breadcrumbs when she's able to, and she gets Bob Barnard on board and everything, and it kind of goes from there. I don't know. I think that's as good a place as any to start with a season 3. I also think I think a season of Patty versus Bob would be interesting. I'm not sure if it goes to any of the other stuff they've done with the show. I don't think it would serve the theme of the show. But I think if you just wanted to see more of these crazy characters we come to love and adore, that kind of thing, you could do a season of Bob versus Patty and see where it takes you. And maybe there is more story to tell once they finally get there. But I think as it stands now, one more season of this and call it a day, if that. I'd be okay with no more seasons.
I think it probably ends with the possibility of some differences being set aside in an uneasy alliance to confront the Regina problem.
Mm-hmm. Maybe. Sort of, it starts off with Bob versus Patty and then becomes all hands on deck versus Regina.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess we'll see. Do you want there to be a season 3, or are you kind of like, no, we've told our story, let's leave it alone?
Part of me is morbidly curious to see how they decide to wrap this whole thing up. I don't know that I'm exactly expecting the last season of Breaking Bad.
Mm-hmm. But I feel like this has the potential to become Dexter, and we're going to see Patty out in the woods cutting trees down.
God damn it, you have to invoke that.
Yes, I do.
He's lumberjack and he's okay. Dun, 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 dun.
Like I feel like the writing staff here, it definitely has the potential to Dexter this thing.
I hate that you're proposing that and making it almost sound like you're hoping for that.
Well, there's always a morbid part of me that wants to see train wreck television.
Oh, I know. I know. You are genuinely jazzed to watch Braun Strowman try to carry Tyson Fury to a watchable wrestling match.
I already have a truckload of popcorn being delivered to my house.
I fully believe that.
All right. I want to thank everybody for listening to our discussion of Insatiable Season 2. There's boxing coverage this weekend. I think Rob and I finally landed on doing Shakur Stevenson versus Joet Gonzalez for the featherweight title, and I believe that's going to be on ESPN Plus next week. It's All Hallows Eve week. We've got 3 shows for you. Blackest Night, and speaking of zombies, Zombieland 2, and speaking of Zombieland 2, we've got a TV party for Lords of Chaos, the Mayhem movie, the movie about Mayhem, rather, the band. It's going to be a short week of podcasts between Halloween and Terminator and whatnot, and the that there and the who what now. We'll have some. We'll probably have some either MMA or boxing coverage on November 2nd, depending on how the Nate Diaz situation shakes out. And if he is indeed off the bad motherfucker championship of the world, I will kidnap a baby from the mall and make it do commentary with me for Canelo versus Kovalev.
Let me tell you something, Gene Mean. Nate Diaz, the UFC, and USADA have achieved the impossible. I'm actually kind of in Nate Diaz's corner so far on this whole thing.
I don't have a dog in the hunt other than if he fights, I'll cover him fighting. If he doesn't, I'm going to watch the Canelo fight.
You know what? My opinion tends to be Nate Diaz is a lot of things, including delusional and perhaps just a little bit of a moron. But a cheater?
No, I don't think he took bad substances.
Son.
No, I don't believe he cheated either. But weird shit happens. It's a weird world. Speaking of weird.
But like I said, I mean that's the thing is I'm kind of rooting for him in that he's not letting USADA nor the UFC turn him into the bad guy here.
You can also check out our coverage of Fear Itself, Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. Sean and I did it from an on-trial for From Dusk Till Dawn, and what a lovely discussion it was. Jesse and I covered Jesse and I covered the new Lacuna Coil album, Black Anima. So those are all in the archive. Tell them about your stream, Gene Mean.
Well, let's see. As we finish recording this right now, it is a couple of minutes until 10 p.m. Central Time, and I would say that tonight by about 10:30 p.m. Central Time, I am probably going to jump on Twitch for just a little bit over at twitch.tv/ComerCodex to stream just a smattering of competitive Overwatch. I've got a team tryout coming up in early 2020, and damn it, I need to be sharp for it. And plus, Shroud just left Twitch today to go join Ninja over on Mixer, so there's a spot available for another top Twitch streamer. Yeah, it ain't gonna be me. I ain't fucking Shroud. Comparing me to Shroud is like comparing bologna to prime rib.
I know you're saying words, but I don't understand a word of it.
But it's okay. It's okay. The people that I want to reach and get over to my stream very well might. But yeah, if you want to watch somebody who focuses on kind of the learning process of Overwatch and PvP games with a really super positive atmosphere that would probably come as a surprise coming from me to a lot of people, by all means, tune in. I am on 6 nights a week, usually from 7 p.m. until 10 p.m. Central Time, except on nights when either life intervenes or Friday and Saturday when I turn over to story-based games, which right now happens to be, in honor of the spoopy season, Alien Isolation, which is where I will be Friday and Saturday night.
All right. Once again, thank you for joining us here on TV Party tonight. For Sean, I'm Mark. Be well, be safe, and behave.